If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
Hey, welcome back, all you fellow American patriots. This is Survival Dispatch News, and I am your host, John Wheaton. I am joined, as always, on a Sunday evening by my guest and cohort in anti-communist propaganda, S2, resident intelligence officer extraordinaire. And that's all of his titles, folks, I promise. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fine.
So, anyways, if you guys are God-fearing, freedom-loving Americans and you value self-reliance, family, and traditional principles that built this nation, then you're in the right place. We are here to stand shoulder to shoulder and help you navigate turbulent times, and that's what we're going to do tonight. And a lot of times we find out how to navigate by looking at history. History is a great indicator of future events, and it's a great lesson to be learned as we go into it, because history doesn't just repeat itself. It commonly rhymes as well. And that is the case tonight, where we talk about the Bible has the minor prophets. I guess communism's Bible has their own minor dictators. So we're kind of going through that. However, they're not necessarily minor when you actually look at them in a per capita basis. Some of the guys we're going to talk about actually were quite proficient murderers and authoritarians. We're going to be looking at Pol Pot to start off with, and we're going to be looking at Castro and communism in Vietnam, and we're going to even get to Africa at some point later on today. So welcome, and let's get to it. We've got a couple of headlines to get to tonight, and many of you guys are aware of some of these, but that's hold up.
We're going to tell you about it anyway.
Yes, we're going to tell you about it anyway. Let me present this real quick. A little bit of a hectic run today. Here we go. So the U.S. House passes reconciliation bill removing suppressors from the National Firearms Act. This is a massive deal, and I know there were a lot of very, very important people that were involved in this. Gun Owners of America was really the spearhead on, shall we say, positively pressuring a lot of these Republicans who were on the fence about this stuff. And we still had a few that were either present votes or non-votes at all, but it got done, and it was passed with the Hearing Protection Act as a part of this. And that is a huge deal, because this is removing something that never should have been on the National Firearms Act from the National Firearms Act. And they also put some things in the bill that kind of gives it a little bit of insulation as it goes through the Senate process. Because if you guys don't know how this works, in order for them to do this kind of a thing, it has to be a reduction in either tax or has to be revenue based. So because this tax was applied to the National Firearms Act, it will they can remove it in a budget reconciliation bill. So very, very cool. And I hope that it sticks to it. Second Amendment rights, we have to hold dear, because it's the only thing that's keeping us from falling into communism, in my opinion. And I'm going to give you a chance to speak to this really quick, S2, and then we'll get into something that's related.
Well, the Senate is where budget reconciliations go to die. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. However, with the current political landscape, man, these senators, like several of them are up for re-election next year, and I just think there's a lot of political pressure that's not there on a normal basis because of with the speed that Trump is trying to move with his agenda. I think they're gonna be really hard pressed to counter this stuff. So, but
I'm sorry, I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic.
Well, We'll see. We will see. The next one is really an interesting one because is DOJ sabotage. This came out literally like the next day or two after it, where a statement from the Department of Justice on a new position on U.S. versus Peterson suppressor case. So I'll give you a quick background of this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but this is a individual case on owning a suppressor. This man was found to have a suppressor and was imprisoned, and he sued saying that suppressors should not be a part of the NFA on those grounds. And this has made its way through the courts all the way up to the Fifth Circuit. Then the Fifth Circuit with a 3-judge panel, made a really weird ruling in saying that suppressors weren't even classified as firearms, which is really weird because they're literally an attachment to firearms. Most other things that are attached, like what makes a machine gun is not the barrel. It's actually the firing mechanism. It is an attachment that you put onto the gun to make it fully automatic. So this is kind of one of those weird rulings. But then shortly after the NFA or the Hearing Protection Act was put into this big, beautiful bill, a judge came out and said, oh no, suppressors should be, are a part of the are a firearm, should be classified as a firearm, and they should not be, they should be regulated because they can be used in crimes and criminal activity, which is a really weird idea because my shirt could be used in criminal activity. I could take it off and tie it around somebody's neck and commit a crime with it. So it's kind of a weird argument. There are some in the 2A community and in the on the internet that are pretty adept at these kind of things, former on the U.S. Supreme Court bar and all that. They're saying that the reason this move was made was to put them back into that they are a firearm because of what's going on with this bill. Because once they're removed from the NFA, there's not a state that can actually, if they're still classified as firearms, there's no state that could actually still regulate them in the same way. So we will see. I'm not too optimistic, but I figured I would share this with you guys as I am a 2A advocate and an absolutist as well. I think we should have machine guns. I think we should be able to have artillery pieces, whatever. That's the way the country was founded. Like it or not, that's the way it should be. But anything on the Second Amendment or anything that you want to add before we move into the main topic? We got a lot to cover.
Yeah, on the whole suppressor thing, there was actually a company out there that's in the suppressor industry that was lobbying against removing them from the NFA. And I really don't understand that. I can't remember the name of the company. It has been spoken on the interwebs a couple of times.
Suppressor Central or
I forget what it was, but it doesn't make any sense why they would lobby against this, because what's going to ultimately happen, even if suppressors were removed from the NFA, you're still going to be in a supply and demand situation. All of a sudden, everybody's going to want a suppressor. So now you're delayed at least a year from getting your paperwork passed through to get a suppressor. As more demand starts to occur with that, that's not going to make them less expensive. It's going to make them, it's going to keep them as expensive or more expensive because of the law of supply and demand. So it makes absolutely no sense why there would be a company in the industry that would be lobbying against this. Just something I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, that was Suppressor Central. Yeah, they're actually an Illinois company. They're in Northern Illinois. Yep.
Wonder if J.B. Pritzker has any piece of them.
Who knows? Maybe some funds transfer. I know that they went through. They came out pretty heavily saying, "Hey, we're not arguing against ownership of suppressors, or we're not arguing against regulation, that kind of thing." Is like, well.
Yeah, you kind of are.
You already kind of stepped in it. In the 2A community, it takes a long time to get out of the doghouse if you are found to be, in that doghouse. So that's all stuff that we're going to continue to cover. We're going to continue to keep you guys updated on, and that's really our headlines that I wanted to cover tonight. So we'll keep you guys abreast of what's going on either through these episodes, or I'll drop some things in the Signal chat for you guys to peruse. So Anyways, we're going to move on to our main topic, and this is from Cuba to Vietnam, the spread of the communist fire. And this is really where this starts to spread out to smaller areas like Cambodia, Cuba, Vietnam. And we see this really sprinkling itself throughout global conflict, regional conflict, wars that we were involved in, and wars that almost happened that did not see Cuban Missile Crisis. But we're going to get started with Pol Pot. And this is a guy that not a lot of people know a lot about, but he is a a special kind of dictator.
Asshole.
Yeah, that's you said it. And this is one where S2 has a lot of information on this. I'm going to throw this up here. This is just a Wikipedia page talking about Pol Pot. He was born in 1925. So right as the communist stuff was getting started in Russia and in other places like even China, he was born. And he was born in Cambodia and became the leader of Cambodia. But I'm going to let S2 kind of share some of the notes that he has, and I will throw up some stuff that I have up here. So go ahead and talk through kind of just a brief overview, and then we'll get into the facts and details of the Cambodian genocide, aptly named.
So who was Pol Pot? Pol Pot is actually not even his real name. His real name was Saloth Sar. And he rose to power in Cambodia through a combination of ideological radicalization, strategic alliances, i.e., China, and exploitation of political instabilities. In the 1940s, Pol Pot, as a young Cambodian, he came from a relatively well-off rural family. There seems to be a theme there with that. All of these, and it's an even a theme that goes into modern times now, where we start to look at all of the communist revolutionaries that are in this country right now, where they're a bunch of young rich kids going to
upper
elite
middle
schools.
class to high class white kids.
Yeah. So there seems to be there's a theme there going on, but he studied in elite schools in Phnom Penh and later in Paris from 1949 to 1953, where he was exposed to Marxist-Leninist ideology and joined the French Communist Party. He was influenced by the anti-colonial sentiment and radical leftist ideas. He came back to Cambodia in 1953 and he began secretly teaching and organizing with communist groups. By the early 1960s, Pol Pot joined the Communist Party of Kampuchea, CPK, that adopted Maoist principles and were advocating for an agrarian revolution. He became party secretary in 1963, leading the CPK towards armed struggle against the Cambodian monarchy. So Cambodia, if a lot of people don't know, was actually run by a king and a queen at the time. And then later, when the Cambodian monarchy was overthrown, he also went against the Lon Nol regime. And during about that time, the Vietnam War was getting started and was destabilizing Cambodia. U.S. bombings occurred between 1969 and 1973, and in the 1970 coup against Prince Sihanouk, creating rural discontent, which Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge exploited to gain support. Using the Khmer Rouge, which is his own basic guerrilla police force, essentially. They began using guerrilla tactics, and they also had Chinese backing and alliances with Sihanouk's forces. The Khmer Rouge would grow in strength during that time. By 1975, they seized Phnom Penh, overthrowing the Lon Nol party, and Pol Pot declared Year Zero, establishing the Democratic Kampuchea and implementing radical policies to create a classless agrarian society that led to Cambodian genocide. Um, Year Zero, as I mentioned, refers to the concept that Pol Pot declared and the Khmer Rouge upon seizing power in 1975, where they established the Democratic Kampuchea. It symbolized their intent to erase the past and radically transform the society into a classless agrarian communist state. And the term marked the start of their revolutionary calendar, rejecting all prior history, culture, institutions, deeming them corrupt or, in common communist terms, bourgeois. So, in practice, year zero involved extreme policies evacuating cities, notably Phnom Penh, because that's where you would find a lot of Pol Pot's opposers. They abolished money, private property, religion, and forcing the population into rural labor camps to create a pure agrarian society, i.e., communes. Pretty similar to what they did. Oh, pretty similar to what Mao did.
Yeah.
Um, but
And
basically, go ahead.
for those that don't understand, when we say agrarian, what you're talking is like that's an agricultural term, and it's where people are relying on the land much more. So that's where the commune aspect of it
Well,
comes in, and all
well,
that kind of stuff.
actually, an agrarian society is more like a barter type society.
Right.
It's
There's not really much. Yeah, that's so people are completely reliant on the resources that they have, and they trade those resources for the resources they don't have, essentially.
right. They don't they didn't money was banned, private property was banned. So all they had was the things that they had or the things that they made or things that they grew to trade back and forth with each other within these communes. But at any rate, this led to the Cambodian genocide with an estimated 1.5 to 2 million deaths from starvation, forced labor, and executions by 1979 when the regime fell. And the term encapsulates the Khmer Rouge's brutal attempt to reset society to an idealized vision, ignoring the human cost. So I'll get
Yes.
in. I can get into the impacts of religion on that if you like, because there was a very
Yeah. So
extreme impact to that.
yeah, go ahead and start talking about that because there is a term that's was made very famous in the Cambodian genocide, and that is you guys have probably heard of the killing fields.
Yep.
And that was something that was made very, very famous, and that is a direct reference to the Cambodian genocide.
Yep.
But go ahead and talk about the religious stuff.
So the Khmer Rouge had a devastating impact on Christianity in Cambodia. As part of its year zero policy to eradicate religion, it was seen as a threat to their vision of a classless agrarian communist society. Basically, what they did was they had suppression of religion. The Khmer Rouge declared Cambodia an atheist state, banning all religious practices, including Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. The churches were destroyed, converted into storage or prisons, or used for propaganda. All of the religious texts were burned, and Christian symbols were eradicated from their society. There was an estimated 10 to 20,000 Christians that were persecuted in Cambodia at that time. You had priests, pastors, and believers that were targeted as enemies of the revolution due to their association with Western influence or resistance to state ideology. And many were executed, tortured, or died in the labor camps. They had a forced abandonment of faith. Christians were forced to renounce their beliefs under the threat of death. Public worship, baptisms, and Christian gatherings were prohibited. Survivors often practiced in secret, risking their lives. We had the decimation of Christian communities. By 1979, the Khmer Rouge was over. When the Khmer Rouge was overthrown, the Christian population was drastically reduced. Both Catholic and Protestant leaders were killed. Only a few thousand Christians remained. The Catholic Church, for instance, reported that nearly all of its clergy were killed or fled. The longer term impact on this was is that the near total destruction of Christian infrastructure and communities meant that Christianity had to be rebuilt almost from scratch after 1979. And then you had missionaries and surviving believers that gradually returned to Cambodia, but the trauma that they had undertaken through that revolution, it wasn't until the 1990s that religious freedoms were restored in Cambodia and Christianity began to slowly recover, even though today it still remains a minority faith. Um,
So basically complete and total destruction of anything religious, like we see as it almost sounds like it's like a broken record, and the methods may be more brutal as we go through this, but I mean, in all honesty, it is clearly the same book, different chapter, is
yeah,
what
I
we've
mean,
covered before.
you can look at he basically based his visions on the same visions that Mao had. And although Mao was brutal and destructive, Pol Pot was probably the most brutal of the Asian dictators at that point in time, even down to the point of where they would recruit children to become part of the Khmer Rouge. They went through brainwashing camps and things of that nature. And the killing fields that you mentioned were a very real thing where people were executed in mass in large mass graves. There was a movie that was put out a while back called actually The Killing Fields. And that's
Hmm.
really what drew attention to that phenomenon that occurred at that time.
Here we go. After 5 years of researching 20,000 grave sites, that's a lot of grave sites. Analysis indicates that at least 1.3 million 886,734 victims of execution. Estimates of total deaths resulting in the Khmer Rouge policies, including the disease and starvation, range from 1.7 to 2.2. Some analysts actually even say all the way up to possibly 3 million. Out of 1975 population of roughly 8 million. By 1979, and I actually just looked this up, it was just over 5 million. That's what you're looking at. That's insane. That is insane. So this was brutality, because actually, if you realize, think about that, 65 million people killed in China. China had, 200 million or something. I'd have to look up the exact numbers, but proportionally to the population, not as big as this. Was literally a quarter of their population. That is insane. So
Yeah, if you compare that on a scale of what Mao did in China compared to this, they're right on par with each other.
yeah. So we're this is really where it gets ugly, gross, and this is nothing but the desire to make people subjugated and do what you want them to do. So yeah,
What I
Pol
find
Pot.
what I find interesting about this was the influence that the CCP actually had on the CPK, because you would think that those things being so far removed from each other, but they really weren't that far removed from each other, because and this is to the point of the title of this show tonight, is the wildfire spread of communism. And if I want to look at it from the Asian standpoint, things didn't start to get really brutal. I mean, you always had killings and things like that that occurred in other communist countries like Russia and things like that. But these people were out and out brutalists. I mean,
Mhm.
they were sadists times
Yep.
10.
Yep. And yeah, it's this is the kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff there's a reason why Pol Pot is not mentioned with people like Adolf Hitler and stuff like that, is because he literally, and really none of them had any reason to do it, but he literally just grew up out of the middle class and ended up being the catalyst to murder millions of people. And you don't hear about these people because you can't really tie them very easily to other conspiracy theories and ideologies everybody wants to push. And it's this is a dark section of history. So did you have anything else that you wanted to share about
I
Pol
think
Pot?
I no, I think that about covers it.
Okay. So we're gonna next move into Cuba. And Cuba was, communism isn't just a history lesson; it's a warning to us as Americans, and we have to be personally responsible, and we have to be involved. And we preach that every week when we talk about this. But peeling back the layers of how Marxism ideology spread often will help us with dealing with weak leadership, propaganda, and turn the tide against these people that want to take our freedoms. For conservatives, it matters because we know that protecting families and communities starts by understanding the threat that we have that has toppled nations before. So we're doing this as a reminder that it doesn't take very long. You look at China was a republic before it actually fell into the hands of communism, and China has never recovered from that. That's the scary part. It has been repackaged after Mao, but they're under the same level of dictatorial reign that they always were. It's just packaged as now they fuel the communists with the capitalists, and then fuel ideology.
Now they have the technology to implement that control without the violence.
Yep, exactly. And that's what and that always is a precursor to violence, but they have figured out how to do it. They figured out the right combination of just enough freedom where people are just a little more comfortable than they were before. So they'll just keep working for you. And then they enslave the ones that they disagree with, like even the Uyghur Muslims but we'll get into that as we get into modern times. So now we move into Cuba. Before the Fidel Castro 1959 revolution, Cuba was a thriving nation. If you actually go back and watch some old movies where there's wealthy guys, I think actually there's a musical like Guys and Dolls or something where they're going down to Cuba because it was one of the top vacation spots in the 1950s. Not even joking. Everybody wanted to go to Cuba because it was a couple hour flight from Florida, from Miami, and you go down there and the food was amazing. The people were awesome. And they had beautiful beaches and just a thriving society. They had a growing middle class, robust trade, and a vibrant culture that was rooted in family and faith. Heavy Catholic influence in Cuba. And that's really where we get started with the downfall. So this is an article by Mike Gonzalez talking about Cuba's lost history. And this is talking about before Castro took power, to give you kind of an idea of what legacy he actually erased. This is the common thread. As S2 just talked about Pol Pot, what do they want to do? Erase history. That's the first move. Then once they erase history, they can write whatever they want and oppress you that way. So the true Cuba was one of resilience and prosperity, and was lost to history under the weight of Marxist revisionism. Sorry, which is the topic of Cuba's lost history. It's important for American Christian conservatives because it's a stark reminder of how quickly a nation can fall. So we look at this, and it's a great read. I would suggest you guys go look at it. But in all of our lifetimes, in most of my lifetime, or actually all of my lifetime, I've never known Cuba to be a free place. I know they say it is now, but is it really? On
average, when the revolution begins, it roughly takes about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
To first you go into socialism light, then you go into socialism, then you go into communism, and all of those have their own little stages in there, like destabilization, and then you start having the revisionists. We've already seen that tried here with the BLM folks who are Maoists.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That they claim they're Marxists, but they're actually Maoists. But that's one of the things that them and Antifa have tried to do by tearing down all of the statues of our founding fathers and some of our other historical figures out there. That was just the beginning of that revolution.
Yep. And so here's where the first character, I guess you could say, in this whole thing, because everybody talks about Fidel Castro, and yes, he was the dictator here, but he had a sidekick. and that was Che Guevara. And you guys may actually recognize this guy. There are a lot of college students that wear this man's face on their t-shirts. You can buy t-shirts with Che Guevara that says Che on it. They've made movies about this guy. This guy is very glamorized in who he was. And he was not a good guy. He was a very, very bad person. He was a Marxist-Leninist, and he was a key contributor to the overthrow of what Cuba was before and what it has become. He was a mass murderer, a racist, and actually very homophobic as well. And but he's a left-wing hero in this country. It's very, very interesting to me that that is the case. S2, Che Guevara. What do you know about Che? I think, are you muted? Are you there? I don't know if I lost him or what, but anyways, getting back to this, S2 will join us back again, hopefully here in just a minute. And this is something that is idolized by leftists and, like I said, college students wearing his likeness on their shirts. And he was a brutal person. He was somebody that you wouldn't want your children. Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, we start talking about stuff and somebody starts fooling around with my internet connection.
It's Che Guevara. Give me the rundown on Che.
Interesting, Ernesto.
Oh, you're cutting out again, bro.
He actually wasn't Cuban. He was Argentinian.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Am I back?
You are back. You cut out there for a minute.
Not actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So he actually wasn't Cuban. He was Argentinian. He was an Argentine Marxist revolutionary. He was a physician, an author, and a guerrilla warfare strategist who became the global symbol of rebellion and anti-imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in Rosario, Argentina, to a middle-class family. Are we seeing a theme yet? And he actually studied medicine at the University of Buenos Aires, and he graduated in 1953, which was about the same time that Pol Pot was starting to start up his shenanigans over in Cambodia. He actually he was quite an adept traveler. He traveled across Latin America and documented it in a book called The Motorcycle Diaries that exposed him to the poverty and inequality all around Latin America, which fueled his passion to fight against the oppressive regimes and U.S. imperialism. And once again, the Cuban Revolution, 1953 to 1959, he joined Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement to overthrow Cuba's U.S.-backed dictator, Fulgencio Batista. So that's a little piece of his early life there, just moving into Castro's revolution.
Yep. And so now, as far as we go into the revolution in, let me pull this up real quick. And it's always this really weird thing. We hear revolution, and as Americans, we understand revolution from the aspect of the American Revolution. I don't think you guys realize how rare an American Revolution is. Only by the grace of God does a revolution like that happen. And I'm not joking. Most revolutions end up being either the French Revolution, read about that, or they end up being some sort of communist takeover revolution. And there's very few other types of revolution. The American Revolution is so rare that it's probably something that happens once a millennia, in all honesty.
which is kind of weird because the guy died in 1967,
7. Yep.
and it was because the Bolivian government captured him, aided by the CIA, who probably actually created Che Guevara.
Right. um, and hold up, I'm just one of my links.
And another little interesting detail about him too, he didn't just stop in Cuba. Cuba was just a layover. He went to the Congo in 1965 to start the same bullshit there.
So this is really where, yeah, and it starts to move. That's honestly, if you look at Africa, a lot of the ethnic cleansing, a lot of that kind of stuff is all propagated by communism. We'll get to the Rhodesian stuff later, and that's another key part of this. Now, when we talk about the Cuban Revolution, it was a much, I guess you could say, softer. Doesn't mean it wasn't worse, because these people were oppressed for years, for decades, almost a century. And it was 2,000 to 3,000 deaths caused by like Batista's forces, revolutionary groups, and civilians. That's all included there. So honestly, not as big of a death toll as we see with stuff like Pol Pot, but still devastating because it was an oppressive and destructive thing. So, and we all have been alive while this regime has been in place. So, and this is another interesting thing, is Cuba under Castro became a hub for global terrorism, providing a safe haven training and funding for Marxist groups like the FARC in Colombia and the ELN. The regime ties to the Soviet Union amplified its reach, allowing Cuba to export revolution across Latin America and Africa. Declassified documents reveal Cuba's role in supporting terrorism, a legacy that continues to destabilize regions even today. So even more so, they were kind of a hub, while they may not have been, the death toll may not have been insane. The hub that they created, because if you look where Cuba is located, it's kind of centrally located in the ocean, where you can get to South America very easily. You can get to North America very easily, and across the ocean to Africa. It's a very easy and centrally located thing that allows these revolutionary Marxist groups to train and to go out on their mission to spread the evil of Marxism and communism to the world. Anything to add there? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Nope, that about covers
you're good. It. Okay. So now we move on to Vietnam. And Vietnam, obviously we know the Vietnam War. And we know the reality of we didn't really ever truly fight that war, and it became a very political war, much like every war since World War II. So this was the war North and South Vietnam, and some of us have parents, grandparents that fought in that war, and 59,000 Americans died in it. But the Vietnam War taught us hard lessons about the limits of American intervention. However, it doesn't seem like we learned them. Afghanistan happened. But Ho Chi Minh, backed by the Kremlin and China, exploited U.S. hesitancy, turning the conflict into a propaganda victory for communism. The war's failure wasn't military, but political, as domestic anti-war movements and the media narratives eroded support, leading to the 1975 withdrawal. This emboldened communists to expand to Cambodia and Laos. So this is the timeline. Pol Pot, remember, 1975, we withdrew from Vietnam. When did Pol Pot's revolution start? S2?
Uh,
1975.
I
I mean,
actually thought it was
that's when the death.
1953.
Well, then that's when the deaths started. That's when the genocide started in 1975, 1975 to
Yeah,
1979.
yeah.
So,
Doesn't this eerily seem to be a planned timeline, much as what we see going on with the globalists today?
I mean, that's the insanity of not fighting a war to win. And we have done that as a nation that could probably win just about any war that we got into. We conveniently worry about the political ramifications of warfare, and that leads to actually more death in the long run. In all honesty, not fighting a war to win is a massive issue. But that expansion into Cambodia and Laos, and then you saw the death toll that we started off with Pol Pot that happened over the next 4 years. So this is important for us because it's a warning of the dangers of weak leadership and media manipulation. We're still seeing this today. All of these things are lessons that we seem to not be learning very well, both of which can undermine the ability of us to stand firm against godless ideologies and that threaten our way of life. And then the false analogies. Bruce Thornton argues that false historical analogies, like comparing the Tet Offensive to a U.S. defeat. So, if you guys don't know the history of the Tet Offensive, it was a massive offensive that was taken on by the North Vietnamese against American forces, and ironically, my uncle was wounded the first night of Tet. Still has shrapnel in his leg to this day. He was a Navy CB and got wounded the first night of the Tet Offensive and got the Purple Heart. But it was portrayed, but the media portrayed this. It was a military loss for the North Vietnamese, which is the irony of it, but it was actually portrayed as a communist victory, sapping American morale. And this pattern of misinformation continues to shape foreign policy, leading and misguiding decisions that favor retreat over resolve. Why is this topic so important for us? Well, we value truth, and truth is important. We have to demand truth from our leaders and from the media, and we don't get much of that. I think actually Congress has a higher approval rating than the media does right now. So these are the lessons that we can learn from fighting a war at half strength. With all of that, as to what are your thoughts on, why the loss in Vietnam really emboldened communism to continue to move across the world?
Well, I'm still going back to my theory that this was a planned timeline. You know, our audience, many of our audience members know that there is a planned timeline for global communism, and they do this every so often. And I personally have viewed this as a couple of different things. One, it's to reset the economic systems, and number two, it's for depopulation purposes. And that's really what I see, because that's really, if we think about it, I believe there was a book that Smedley Butler wrote called War is a Racket. And then there's a saying that goes along with that that says all wars are bankers' wars. So who benefits from these wars? The
Mm-hmm.
bankers, the war hawks, the weapons manufacturers, and the people that hold interest within those companies.
Yep.
So I still hold my views that everything that we're seeing right now, and this is an interesting theme also, is that when you hear the word intifada, a lot of people don't know what that means. They think it has something to do with the Middle East, and it absolutely does not. Global intifada means global communism,
Yeah.
and that is the goal.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And so that moves into, so in the middle of the Cold War, there was some things that happened in the area of Angola in Africa. And so Angola had a civil war, and this was a proxy battleground for the Cold War, with Cuba sending, hold on, let me get this up, with Cuba sending 50,000 troops to support the Soviet-backed MPLA. U.S. and South Africa backed opposing forces, but Western hesitancy allowed communism to gain a foothold. Angola's people suffered decades of conflict, economic ruin, and oppression under Marxist rule, a pattern repeated across Africa. So this is another lesson of where we cannot hold back. We cannot do half measures because it does not work. We are dangerously close to, we're getting involved in all of these things that don't really matter. And I am not a foreign war getting into all of these kind of things, but also we have to stand for truth. We have to, if we're going to fight a war, we have to fight a war the right way, and that is to win. If you're not fighting a war to win, then it's literally just a bankroll for bankers and the military industrial complex. Ironically, one of my favorite things of two presidents was George Washington's farewell address and Dwight Eisenhower, the head commander of the World War II Allied forces. Both of them were president. So you're thinking the general that led the Revolutionary Army, the beginning of the country, and then the man who led all Allied troops in World War II. And both of them warned against what they called the military industrial complex. And that's what we're living under right now. And that is what these kind of half measures and wars, they feed that in a kind of an odd way, in that they say, well, we can't win with what we have, so we need to spend more money on better stuff. But the reality is we're not fighting with the full force that we have. I think there's probably been one conflict, and it was more of a conflict than a war, where we actually kind of flexed our muscles a bit and said, yeah, you don't know what we've got. And that was Desert Storm. That was probably the one time where we were like, yeah, this is what we can do, and we're not even at full power right now. But what are your thoughts on that? And we're kind of off a little bit of subject, but it's kind of one of those things that we need to talk about, because history is kind of showing that when we don't get fully involved and we don't actually fight, we end up losing, and then communism ends up winning.
Well, I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Oh, did I lose you again?
Allowing your enemy to win every single time.
You cut out there for a second. Say what you just said.
They really hate me talking about this.
Yeah. You're blowing up the narrative tonight.
When we don't fight a war, we always end up losing. And when I say we don't fight a war, I mean we just basically go through the motions. We're not fighting to win the war. We're just there because some politician got the bright idea that, hey, let's have a war. We need to make more money for the country. And here's the other part of this too, is that people that fight in wars, they always fight the last war or they always fight the new war with the last weaponry.
Yep.
So and this is another thought that I could go deep into, but as technology advances, it's no longer about how much bloodshed. It's all about the technology now. How can we control people? And we start getting into bio warfare. We start getting into implantation devices and things like that. And that is really the war that's going on right now. And that is literally the war for your mind.
Yep. Absolutely. So now we get into, and this is probably where we're gonna start to wrap up here, because well, there's a lot of information here. We could probably do 2 episodes out of it, but I wanted to cover this one just because this is something that's still going on. Chris just did an episode a couple of days ago about the targeting of white people in South Africa. This is not a new thing. This is a very, very real thing. And this was I'm going to point out one thing: 1964 to December 1979, the Rhodesian Bush War. And I have a deep place in my heart for Rhodesian camo. Absolutely love it. But that was a fight against communism. That was a fight against Marxist guerrillas and anti-colonialism. Spoiler alert, there are a lot of white people in South Africa. It's not all black people in Africa. Elon Musk is African, by the way. He's a South African. I personally know some guys that are South African. They have a very unique accent. It's kind of a combination of British and Africa. But in the 1970s,
it's very, very guttural German.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Yeah. But Mozambique and Zimbabwe fell to Marxist regimes post-independence. And this is how it always happens. You see this too, S2? After an independence is won, after you become a republic, you really run a risk of allowing these dictatorial Marxists to come in. They use the fog of war, the fog of revolution to take control. So these governments were backed by Cuba. So this is where Che comes in, and Castro, all of these people. So this was in the mid 60s, right before Che died. But as S2 said, he went to Africa to implant this ideology as well, and the Soviet Union. So same bedfellows there.
Actually, Che Guevara did not like the Soviet style bureaucracy that went on in their style of communism. He didn't like that. So that was why he went to the Congo in the first place, was to implement his own version of it.
Yeah. And so here is so the Western policies ignored the suffering, focused on the diplomacy, while Marxist guerrillas, anti-colonialists, used anti-colonialism to justify land grabs and race-based conflicts, leading to decades of instability. So all of these white people in South Africa, they owned land. A lot of them were farmers and stuff, and their land was seized based off of the anti-colonialism narrative. So a lot of these people, England, the UK, had a large empire that they conquered large parts of Africa. Well, started having children. They set up colonies there. And so there were British people that lived there and had children and grandchildren. And as that went through, yes, there were a lot of white people that were having a lot of kids in South Africa, and they stayed there and they lived there and they owned land there. So the narrative was, well, they came and conquered us. It's the same narrative that you see in the 1619 Project and all of these other things that are coming through our universities right now. The anti-Christopher Columbus, the anti-all of this stuff, the anti-westward expansion, all of that kind of stuff. And they use the term colonialism, your colonizers. And so that's the way that they viewed them. That's a Marxist ideology. And that's a wedge point that they use to take control. So they stole land that was owned by white people and pushed them out. And for decades, they fought this war. There are some very interesting videos on the Rhodesian Bush War on YouTube that you guys should go check out. They're really interesting, where they were very aware they were fighting communism. And this is important. So the last point I'm going to make, and this is a really important point, is containment is a myth with communism. Cold War policy of containment. That was how we fought the Cold War. Don't get involved in conflict. Just keep Russia and Cuba and all of these countries contained. Don't let them flow out. How good of a job do we actually do? We've just went through all of those decades of the Cold War, from the 1960s to the 1980s, even up to the early 1990s. Did communism continue to spread?
We sucked at it.
Yeah, we really suck at containment. We're really good at war. We're really good at fighting wars. We're not good at containment wars or half measures. If we need
there's no such thing as containment.
Right, exactly.
There isn't, because you can put all the sanctions you want on people all you want to, but you have the Che Guevaras of the world that are basically the Forrest Gumps of communism. They're just
Hmm.
globetrotting everywhere, and they're going over there. They're organizing with groups. They're organizing with people. They're infiltrating governments, and that's exactly what has happened here in America. Is
Hmm.
they have spent decades trying to get people here on legal technicalities, and then they get into our government and they do their kind of shit that they're doing right now. And this is what I don't understand, is where is the common sense? If I were Trump right now, I would order every single congressperson to be interviewed by the Department of whatever I can't think of the name right off the top of my head, but basically whatever agency that Tulsi Gabbard is head of right now.
Oh,
They
DNI,
every
National
yeah,
Security.
DNI.
Yeah.
I knew it was on the tip of my tongue. Every single member of Congress should be interviewed by them for their loyalties. We have way too many people in our government right now that have come right out and said that my loyalties are to my home country. Well, if your loyalties are to your home country, get the fuck out.
Hmm. Yeah. So
Sorry, I got a little
really, we're
passionate there.
you're totally good, man. You're totally good. Um, so and really one of the ways that we won the Cold War technically, I guess, was and that was through Reagan pushing on the economic front, because he realized one thing that you have to realize with communism is the same thing that's going on with China right now. They're all paper tigers. Yeah, they can do some damage, but their people are so oppressed and so broken that they don't really they're not the economic powerhouses that people push them out to be. China would crumble.
Well,
I mean,
Russia,
we saw what happened. What was that?
Russia was a different story. They had the money and the people. They could walk the walk.
Yeah, but after several years of draining them economically, and also Reagan was really good with propaganda as well, and causing them to spend so much money on stuff that they didn't really need to spend money on, space race and all of that kind of stuff. He caused them to collapse economically from the inside. And in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. But there was a void there, and it was filled by the remnants of the Soviet Union. And Russia still today is under the control of Putin, who was a KGB agent. So definitely, like, not necessarily in good hands still to this day. Now, are they the threat that they were in the 1980s? No, but they still have not been, given this. They still haven't been given this insane levels of freedom. I don't really care how many news organizations go over there and talk about how great Russia is. They're still under a authoritarian regime. And so as we start to wrap up here, we can trace communism all the way back to its roots in Karl Marx's insanely demonic mind. And we can go all the way forward to today. We can look at Cuba. We can look at Cambodia. We can look at Vietnam. And we can look at Africa. We can see all of the evil that has been bestowed by this terrible ideology. And the one thing I want to
further. We can go back even we can go back even further than that. We can go back to the pharaohs.
Right. Any authoritarian conquest that wants to engulf you and enslave you into its ideology, and it's either that ideology or you're in prison or you're dead. That's wrong. And as Christians, we understand that is a stark contrast to what the gospel says, to what the Bible says. It offers life. It offers freedom and liberty. And communism, Marxism only offers death. It only offers suffering for everybody. And it may take longer for some, but everyone suffers and everything falls apart when you put this ideology into practice.
So I think it's important to add here that the oppression and all of the other things that come along with communism is not the goal of communism. The goal of communism is to destroy capitalism, period.
Yes.
Full stop. But they will use any means necessary to accomplish that, because if they don't destroy capitalism, then that means in the communist eyes that there is a level of inequality that exists in the world.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it also makes you understand, it's like I said last Sunday with you and Jeff, is that it's amazing that everything communism tries to promise is actually what you get by following the principles of the Bible. It's ironic. And it's like everything that's demonic, everything that's evil is offered on a plate of utopia. And then when you get past that plate of utopia, you realize, oh, this is just evil and death.
It's
And
dystopia.
it's dystopian. Yes. And it's not anything that any of us really want. Are there injustices in the world? Absolutely. Are there inequalities or inequities? Absolutely. That's because of human nature. It's not because of some ideology is going to come in and fix it, because it's a heart issue. It's a problem in our hearts. And if we don't fix that, then we have a problem. But one thing I want to encourage all of you guys out there that have stuck with us, and we're going to get into modern times very, very soon. And we've got even some special guests that may be coming on that are subject matter experts to talk about the new revolutions that are actually on our shores, because up until now, we've really been talking mainly about other countries. But what is affecting us? What is coming into our countries? And the reason I wanted to look through history, the reason I wanted to give you guys a roadmap to what's gone on throughout history with communism is because I want you guys to be prepared to have these discussions, to have these debates, to actually have the information that you need so that you can counter all of these narratives that may sound good on the surface, but they're just full of death, and they're full of evil, and they're full of destroying merit-based thinking and actually any kind of capitalism or anything, any freedom or liberty is what they're actually aimed at. So this is why we're doing this, because I think it's extremely important. So S2, I'm going to let you give your thoughts, and then we're going to finish closing it out.
So my thoughts on this: we are already in the middle of a communist revolution.
Mm-hmm.
We have been for the last 5 years, if not before. We've seen it. It's been going on since World War II when it started, with all of the slow marching and everything that's been going into the understand is you have to listen to their language.
Mm-hmm.
Have not changed. And somebody that I actually encourage people to follow on X, if you're on X, and you can find her on Substack too, is Carolyn Boroshenko. She is an absolute expert and subject matter expert on what the socialist revolution a very long time.
Yep. Give me just a second. I'm going to put her up here. Did I lose you, S2?
Nope, I'm still here.
How do you spell her last name? I'm having a...
It's Borriy.
I got her.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to share this real quick so you guys can see here. And this is spoiler alert. We're trying to maybe get her on one of these episodes here before too long to talk through some of the things that she knows. She's extremely she's really sharp with this stuff and is posting stuff all the time. So
she also does a lot of the she infiltrates a lot of the Zoom meetings of the leftists when they have them, including some of the universities that she's recently done where they've had their little struggle sessions that have been going on. And then she takes and she breaks those down into her own live streams.
Yep. So good follow on X there. She does a lot of stuff, and we're hoping S2's working his magic to hopefully get her on one of our upcoming episodes, probably a week from this coming Sunday. We've got some alterations of the schedule. We'll be here Tuesday, and we're going to be covering modern China and a couple of other things, and then we get into our modern age. But spoiler alert, next Tuesday, we're actually at WAFT on the trip that we had planned on doing last week that was so messed up by airline flights. But anyways, as we close out here, all of the stuff that we were talking about is it's important for you guys to know. It's important to understand this, to research it, and to be involved, because the key that the S2 just said is watch the language that's being used. They all use very similar language, and you have to understand that first. If you guys want to show support to us, there is a great way that you can do it. So right now, we offer a free 1-month Guardian subscription. And oh goodness, I don't have the code in there. I will put the code up for you guys. But if you guys want to, go over and support us at Substack. And if you go to Substack, you will find all of this extra content that we are getting with you guys, that we're making for you guys. And actually, I've got a note I'm trying to pull up, so that's why I'm a little scattered right now. So for Guardian memberships, full access to the sit rep on 6 days a week, an invite to the high traffic private signal chat, and that is blowing up. S2's in there all the time dropping truth bombs. $370 survival dispatch insider emags, including a 228-page survival guide for any kind of SHTF situation. In addition, backup for the next 2 weeks, Guardian chat on Substack. If signal goes down, this is already in place. Early access to JJ Morris's videos twice a week. You'll get them a day to 3 days ahead of the public access to YouTube. That's already in place. So when you sign up, you get that. The Sunday Threat Matrix, direct from Chris, a weekly analysis of developing threats, cyber attacks, border incursions, pandemic risks, and actionable next steps. So this is going to go into effect next Sunday. The SDN emergency alert. This will be a text email alert exclusive for Guardian members about emerging threats and high priority breaking news. And this will launch in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of things coming down the pike. If you guys go over, so we are extending the opportunity to get the Guardian membership on Substack for only $7.99 a month or $75 a year. That's 2.5 months off, basically for free, for another week due to the popular demand. We have seen an absolute explosion in new members, and this is amazing. It's been over the past week, so we really appreciate all of you guys going over and showing your support. We could not do this stuff without you. And just keep it coming, and we'll keep cranking out the extra info for you guys. Guys, it's been amazing
John,
bringing this to you. Yeah, go ahead.
one final word.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody, I want you to remember why you have a 3-day weekend this weekend. Honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country.
Absolutely. And that was one thing that I wanted to say as well was I have people that I know I served with that are no longer with us because of the ultimate sacrifice. And that is something when you're doing a barbecue with your family or you're sitting down tomorrow, make sure and just thank God that those men were willing to pay that price so that we can have the freedom, so that we can do live streams and talk without being fearful of a communist dictator coming through our door and throwing us in prison or killing us. It's really, really important for us. So to all those, we say thank you. And to the families that lost those individuals, we say thank you as well. So let's let's close this out as we usually do with prayer, and then we'll let you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Heavenly Father, I am thankful that you've given us minds and the ability to analyze history, to see the failures and the faults with wrong and evil ideologies. And Lord, I pray that you continue to bring those things to light in our culture as we try and repair the damage that's already been done by these evil ideologies. I pray that you give parents of children that are going through school or in universities the ability to speak to their children so that they can educate them on the wrong things that are out there and that are being propagated in our universities, in our classrooms. Lord, I pray that you give us wisdom and zeal to continue to pursue truth, to fight the good fight, to never stop and never give up, because we matter in this fight, and you want us to be involved. And I pray that you give us the strength and the wisdom to do so. Lord, I am thankful for all of those men who sacrificed their lives and what this weekend commemorates. Lord, I pray that you give comfort to families that still may be suffering the losses, but also thank you that we thank those men who gave their lives for this country. I pray that everyone has a safe and successful weekend, and that we come back here refreshed and renewed. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Guys, we'll be back tomorrow again with another episode. Chris has some awesome things prepared for you. And until then, stay safe, be trained, be prepared, and God bless America.
Hoorah.
Hey there, soldier. Need to refill your meds or ask your care team a quick question? The VA Health and Benefits app has your 6 right in your pocket. This thing's got a 4.8 rating in the App Store. Veterans are calling it a game changer. And trust me, once you use it, you'll never want to go back. Remember the days of phone tag with your provider? Forget that. Now you can message your VA care team directly, like texting a buddy. And guess what? Over 300,000 secure messages are sent every month. This isn't the future. It's your VA right now.
Need a refill while you're out in the woods or at the store? No problem. Just tap and it's mailed to you. No waiting in line.
The app helps you track your claims and appeals too. It's like a radar for your benefits, giving you updates instantly.
Don't forget your appointments. The app syncs with your calendar so you're always on time. Even your drill instructor would approve.
Need proof of your veteran status for a discount? One tap and it's done. No paperwork, no stress. Download the VA Health and Benefits app. It's your digital battle buddy, ready to roll 24/7. And if you like it, share it with your squad.
This has been another public service announcement brought to you by the Dilly Meme Team.